So you've picked up Monster Train, and you're not sure whether you love it or you hate it, but what you know is you want to get better, and you don't know how to possibly get better at Monster Train. It seems just so daunting. Maybe you've even gotten yourself to maybe Covenant 1 or maybe even Covenant 2, but you've just now hit a hurdle that you can't pass. Wherever you find yourself, I want to help you today to figure out how to not suck at Monster Train. Just a few quick tips that we'll go into today to figure out how you can keep going, get better, climb those Covenant rankings, and basically not suck at this game. Alright, before we get started, let's look at the basics of gameplay. So you're going to start a battle. Ignore that trial thing for now. We'll get to it later. You're going to have enemies who enter on one floor, on the first floor. They're going to make their way up to floor 4 where your pyre is. If your pyre hits 0, you're dead. Your pyre only refills when you make it to a non-battle event that heals your pyre, or you get a card or artifact to restore the pyre, which neither of those are really that common, but we'll move on. So you want to defend your pyre. Okay, but enough about the mechanics. You didn't come here to learn about how to play the game. Hopefully, and more than likely, you already know all of this. Now let's get started talking about how to win this game. Right, the first tip is have a plan, frankly. You only have a limited amount of space on each floor of your train, and you only have 5 slots to start with as it is. You can see how big each monster is by the dots above their card. And 5 goes away pretty fast. Now, as you'll be facing waves and waves of enemies, you'll want to figure out the best configuration for each floor. The most single principle to keep in mind when starting is to have a tank for each floor and high damage dealers in the back. Now, there's a lot more that you can get into than that, but this is the basic principle that's going to help you get further than just placing whoever shows up in your deck first. After all, if you place someone who has very low health in the front and put units behind it that have more health, more than likely that low health unit's going to die first, leaving you with a lot less damage output. It's a basic principle, but it will start to get you farther if you apply it. The second tip, keep your deck lean. You only draw 5 cards per turn, and compared to other deck builders, you can't infinitely draw out a battle by just playing more block and hitting them with small hits. Once you have a deck over 30 cards, there's a chance you might not see the cards you're waiting for until the final phases, if at all. With this in mind, and keep in mind turn 1 about having a plan, as I said before, don't just take a card because you might think it's useful. Consider that every card that you take lowers the chances of getting the card you know works well with the deck you're building right now. One strategy that I advise against is to take a lot of consume cards, thinking this is keeping your deck lean. For the same reason that I just said, if you have a large deck, you won't have many chances to cycle through your deck. Shuffling your deck and redrawing multiple times might not happen in that case. This is, of course, different from taking a consume card because it's more powerful. I actually do recommend taking consume cards for this very principle. You're not going to cycle through very many of your cards anyways, so taking a higher powered consume card is actually okay. You're not going to have to worry about it not coming around all that often. Alright, tip number 3. Build for the boss you're going to face. The most difficult fight is going to be your final boss with the Seraph. If you can beat your final boss, you can beat any other mini-bosses along the way. Well, for the most part. There are actually 2 exceptions to this rule that I'll cover towards the end of the video. So of the 3 Seraphs that you have, there's Seraph the Chaste, Seraph the Diligent, and Seraph the Temperate as your final bosses. Seraph the Chaste will have the buff stacks from your units and have the debuff stacks from the enemies, which means that buffs and debuffs just aren't going to work very well against Seraph the Chaste. Seraph the Diligent is going to consume the first spell card you use each turn, and Seraph the Temperate will apply 3 sap to new monsters who enter the train. Now if you're facing the Chaste, the first one I mentioned, you're going to want to rely on pure strength and non-status spell cards. Things like Rage, Spell Weakness, and Frost, while normally very strong against the other 2, will no longer stack to help you win. If you're facing the Chaste, you're going to want a few more disposable spell cards that you don't mind losing. You're only going to consume the first spell card you play each round, even if that spell was already a consume card. I highly recommend taking consume cards instead of non-consume cards in most circumstances anyways, as I mentioned before. There is an exception to this, but that's tip number 6, and I really don't want to get ahead of myself quite yet. Now, if you're facing Seraph the Temperate, it's really not that big of a deal. Sap 3 to new monsters who enter the train. That'll go away after a few turns, so any build you do, while weak at first, will be strong towards the later rounds. Where are we at? Tip number 4. Get artifacts. Artifacts have the ability to turn the tide of your battle. If you're familiar with Slay the Spire, this is identical to the effect that relics can have on your ability to score a victory. Now, unlike Slay the Spire, there aren't 1 or 2 artifacts that I would tell you to look for every single time. In fact, many relics can be the MVP of your run one time, then completely useless the next time. Take Forever Flame, for example. This lowers the cost of units by 2. If you have mostly 1 cost units, this artifact will have limited impact, if any at all. If, however, you pick this up early so you could take high energy cost monsters and be able to deploy them easily, which significantly lowers your chances of winning. Pyrestone Housing is another good take in the right situation. This allows you to upgrade your units 3 times instead of 2. If you have just a few powerhouse units, you have the ability to make them even stronger. If, however, you have many smaller units, there's a chance you haven't been able to upgrade it even 2 times on any of your units, and this one really won't do you much good. Concussive coals, in fact, can harm you in the right or, well, wrong situation. If you're running a spike build with the Awoken clan and you place your spike tank or champion on the first floor, then dazed units will not attack and not get damaged on spikes. You give a free pass to weaker units you are planning on taking out on the first level, and yes, I've actually ripped my run getting concussive coals on an otherwise really strong build. Most artifacts will help you though, which is why you want to prioritize artifacts whenever possible. Tip number 5. Take the trials selectively. Now, while I say to prioritize artifacts, be careful of trials. You shouldn't always take a trial. You need to consider your build. For example, are you doing a spell-heavy build? Then doing a trial where the enemy units have spell shield won't be a good idea. Are you playing with lower health monsters? Then taking a trial where enemies have spikes is also a bad idea. The only exception to this is the very first trial. While normally only giving you 75 gold or a unit if you're lucky, these trials are usually the easiest. The first mini-boss isn't that strong, and you can survive everything without even placing units or playing spells. Even with the trial where enemies appear on each floor, you'll still lose only about half of your pyre health. Yes, I've tried this. That first battle is kind of a tutorial after all, so go ahead and take that first trial every time. That said, consider all your other trial options carefully. Trials have good rewards, but don't throw away a good run chasing after a bit of greed. And for the record, this is coming from the king of greedy runs. I don't follow my own advice a lot here, and I pay the penalty many times. Don't be like Skip. Listen to Skip. Don't be like Skip. And the last tip, tip number 6, use the holdover spell to upgrade. Now this one is oddly specific for my tips and tutorial videos, but this one's worth it. This can help you turn a mediocre run into a winner when done correctly. There is a spell upgrade called Holdover. This is the most powerful upgrade in the game. Holdover returns a played spell card to your hand the next turn. This means that if you can take a card and apply Holdover to it, now bonus points if you can also upgrade that to a 0 cost card, then you can play that card each and every turn and just spell your way to victory. So how do you put all this into practice? Well, you're gonna start with a Hellhorned and Awoken clans, and I would actually recommend you swap those. The 2 champion upgrades that are specifically rewarding are the Explosive upgrade, where healing deals damage to the first enemy unit, and the Bristling upgrade that gives you spikes to your champion. You can't go wrong with the Rejuvenate though. Card draw is OP after all, so frankly if you want to ignore tip number 2, you want to build a massive deck build, then that's actually the route you want to go with your champ. From here, go ahead and take the first trial where enemy units appear on your first floor or they get stronger, whatever you get. If you're lucky enough to get the one where enemy units appear on every floor, then go ahead and place your champion on floor 3 and they're going to take care of them all for you. And as a note, yes, that fairy that gives you gold if you kill them is worth it, even at the expense of a little pyre, so definitely kill them if you can. Gold is life in this game. From here, look for rejuvenating spells, spike spells, heavy-hitting Hellhorned monsters, and you'll be on your way to victory and doing Covenant streaks in no time. One important thing that I should note is that there is a couple mini-bosses you'll face who don't play fair. In particular, the Crystal Cloak is a mini-boss who starts out with 8 stealth. Now, stealth means that for 8 turns in a row, they'll attack and you won't counterattack. That means that you're just going to be taking lots of damage, and more than likely your first floor is going to get wiped out without you being able to attack at all. You can use something like a Spikes tank, which is great because then at least you'll do some passive damage, but otherwise you want to put something like maybe units you don't care as much about, or your train stewards down there, and then put your more heavy-hitting units on the second and third floor to take care of the Crystal Cloak. So that about does it for the 6 tips. I hope this has been helpful. We are going to, in the next videos, go and look through the winning factors for each clan, what to look for, what to take for your champion, special relics and special spells that you want to take to really get those winning conditions with each and every clan unit. So if you're not subscribed, please go ahead and do subscribe so you make sure to see the next videos come out as they drop. But until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.